Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Friday Ramblings. I am, of course, your perpetual host, the Bardic one. Still busting out the spookiness, because it is October. It's Halloweeny fun, so we got to be spooky. Woo! I know what y'all thinking. What are we going to do for this latest video in our countdown to Halloween rambling type stuff? Well, we're going to talk about a video game series that is kind of abandoned, kind of overlooked by a lot of people, but is full of gory excellence. It's so gory, it's got the word splatter in the title. That's right, we are talking about Splatterhouse. Now, I did a run of the first 3 Splatterhouse games a couple years ago for my Halloween Bardic Play episodes, and I will go ahead and post a link for those right there at the bottom. It's one big video because they're very hard games, so I really didn't get very far in any of the games. But once you're done with this video, feel free to check out that link so you can see some of the Splatterhouse goodness for yourself. But more importantly, as I said, first you got to watch this video to know exactly what kind of game fun you can be watching. Now, the Splatterhouse series is of the classic arcade beat-em-up genre and was produced by Namco, aka Namco Limited, aka Namco Bandai, sometimes Bandai Namco. But back when they made the original Splatterhouse game, they were just plain Namco. Now, the original game came out in July of 1989. Excuse me. February of 1989. Original in Japan of 1988, but we're mostly going by the North American release dates. Blech, my tongue is possessed. Because North America is my country of origin, so that's the stuff I tend to gravitate towards. What can I say? It's the thing. But yes, the original Splatterhouse game hit American shores in February of 1989, having come out in Japan the previous fall. The game is heavily noted for its time for its violent nature, featuring, as I said, lots of blood and gore. Basic plot is that a young man named Rick and his beautiful girlfriend Jennifer enter the West Mansion during a storm only to get separated. Jennifer is kidnapped and Rick is severely beaten, heavily implied that he is killed. However, he finds himself resurrected and awakened, now wearing the Terror Mask, or Hell Mask, depending on your particular region you're playing in, or if it's the original arcade or one of the platform ports. The mask gives him a big boost in physical muscle as well as strength, allowing him the power to rescue Jennifer from the demonic denizens of the West Mansion. To be honest, if there's one thing you can always rely on in an 80s horror, it is creepy mansions. Generally, most people do use the term Terror Mask. This is what we're going to stick with. If you play the original arcade version, the Terror Mask looks like a white hockey mask and gives the player character very Jason Voorhees-esque vibes. The ports of it would make the mask red with black accents to help prevent too much potential legal entanglement and complaints over the fact that the character does kind of look like a bootleg Jason Voorhees. Later games would use the improvement in graphical prowess to make the mask have more of a skull motif to help pull away from that original homage look that was towing the legal line. After surviving multiple levels of the mansion, you discover that the mansion itself is alive and possessed by evil, as well as unfortunately having to kill your girlfriend Jennifer when she herself is turned into a fanged monster. When it's all said and done, Rick destroys the house itself, which bursts into flames. Escaping the burning mansion, Rick comes across a grave marker. Terror Mask then releases energy into the grave, reviving a monster known as Hell Chaos, which is your final boss of the game. Rick destroys the creature, the mask shatters, turning Rick back to normal, and he flees as the house burns to the ground. The credits roll. Classic horror movie fashion, though, after escaping, the Terror Mask reassembles and revives itself, hinting at the future sequels that would come due to the game's big success. So, how many ports of this game were there? Well, let's count it down. Besides the original arcade format, it came out on the TurboGrafx 16, Microsoft Windows, Windows Mobile, other mobile phone platforms, including the iOS, and even the BlackBerry. The TurboGrafx 16 port has also featured as part of the Nintendo Virtual Console service, which means that Wii and Wii U owners had the option to play it, which I myself did. It lives on my Wii. This is all well and good fun. But, as we said, the adventures were not over. The next game in the series is actually a Japanese exclusive and was designed for the Famicom, the Japanese equivalent of the American Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES as most of us called it. Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti is more of a platformer style game and features more super deformed cartoonish style characters, removing a lot of the graphic violence of the original game and serving as more of a parody of the smash hit. It was well regarded in Japan, though, although its parodic and cartoonish nature did mean that it has never been officially released in America. So it's kind of a spin-off style game, you could say, especially with the sequels not acknowledging the events of Wanpaku Graffiti, which itself kind of does a meta joke where the original ending of the game implies that the game itself was a movie Rick and Jennifer were filming. So, but then you get you can get a bonus ending if you collect all of the crystals in the game that are kind of optional items. So it's what we would now call a completionist bonus, where it implies that the terror mask used in the filming of the movie that is the point of the game, yeah, meta jokes get weird like that, is the actual sentient living terror mask from the first game. So things get oddball. This brings us to Splatterhouse 2, which came out in July of 1992 in America. Actually came out in America before Japan, which got it August 4th, about a month later. Unlike the original game, which came out in Japan first. Now, Splatterhouse 2 was not released in the arcades. It was released as a Genesis exclusive, or again, if you're playing it in other parts of the world, the Mega Drive. 3 months have gone by since the events of the first game. Rick is still suffering from his guilt of being unable to save Jennifer and has been plagued by nightmares of her and the Terror Mask. As he attempts to reassemble his life, the Terror Mask reappears to Rick and tempts him to find the house, telling him that Jennifer can still be saved. Rick dons the mask again, gaining the great power he had in the first game, fighting his way through the West Mansion again, before finally rescuing Jennifer. So, good times. I like that the plot continuity picks up from where the original one did. So, all things are great. Now, there are a few regional differences between the Japanese and the North American versions. In the Western version of the game, the design of the terror mask is more skull-like, whereas in the Japanese version, the mask loosely resembles a kabuki mask. Due to translations, when the game was localized, some elements are clear in the Japanese version. In the Japanese version, the mask instructs Rick to, quote, find the hidden house, and that Jennifer is in the land of the dead. In the Western version, the mask instead tells Rick to go back into the house and does not specify where Jennifer is. This has caused some confusion among players that have not played the original Japanese version, with several believing that the intact mansion in the second game is the West Mansion from the original Splatterhouse, when in fact the charred ruins that make up the first stage are what is left of West Mansion, and this is a second pure demon evil house connected to the land of the dead where Jennifer is. The game was received very well and is just as highly difficult as the first one. As I kind of said at the beginning with my stream, I have never beaten either of the two Splatterhouse games. Actually, I didn't even beat the third one, but we haven't gotten to the third one yet. The game still retains a lot of the gory, in-your-face, splatterific violence of the first game, so yeah, these are not games to play for little children at all. These are your teenager on up style games. So, good times. This game is also came out on the Nintendo Virtual Console service, so yippee yippee. This leads us into Splatterhouse 3, which was also a Mega Drive / Genesis exclusive. So if you're catching up, folks, back in the day, if you owned a Genesis, you could play Splatterhouse 2 and 3, but you could not play 1. And if you had the TurboGrafx 16, you could play 1, but you could not play 2 or 3. See, that is one of the things where I do give the modern video game industry, outside of first-party games, you know, your Marios, Zeldas, back before Sonic got out of the software, or hardware industry, I should say, hardware side of it, Sonic. If you're gonna be a third-party company, go ahead and get those nice multi-platform releases so everybody can play along and have great options to play. This is good times, folks. But anyway, as we were saying, Splatterhouse 3 came out in Japan March of 1993. The North American release came out in August of 1993. The game takes place about 5 years after the events of Splatterhouse 2. Rick and Jennifer have since married and have a son named David. Rick has become successful on Wall Street and bought a mansion in Connecticut, putting the memories of the terror mask behind him. The mask, however, is not done with Rick, and speaks to Rick, eventually convincing him to don the mask for the first time and fight the monsters that have now invaded Rick's mansion. Which means, of course, it's threatening his wife and child. Rick eventually defeats the evil one who had planned to use his son David's latent psychic abilities to unlock the power of an object known as the Dark Stone. Upon defeating the evil one, the mask reveals its true evil intentions, and then Rick must destroy the terror mask permanently. Now, this game's a little bit different from the first two Splatterhouse games in that it features 6 levels, most of which take place inside the mansion. However, unlike your classic side-scrolling beat-em-up style gameplay, Splatterhouse 3 features non-linear exploration through several different rooms, forcing Rick to often backtrack as he tries to find the exit. Players are given a map of each level, and each level must be cleared in a certain amount of time. Although this does not affect gameplay, running out of time results in changes in the plot, creating 4 possible endings. And I'm going to go down and run through them real quick. I know I generally try to be as spoiler-free as possible, but there's a mega bad ending in which Rick fails to save both his wife and child. There is an ending where Jennifer dies, but David is rescued. Or you can get an ending where David dies and Jennifer is rescued. Or you can get the mega happy ending where both survive. This, of course, is the one you most want to get and is achieved by completing all the levels in the requested amount of clearance time. Also new to Splatterhouse 3 is the power meter, which can be filled by collecting Eldritch Orbs found throughout levels. And once the bar is filled by at least one orb, the player can choose to transform Rick into a more monstrous version of himself with the terror mask seemingly fused to his head. In this state, Rick is significantly stronger and can execute a special attack that involves pieces of his flesh extending from his chest area and acting as a weapon. So, good times. Now, for many years, as I said, this came out in '93, it seemed like that was the end of all things Splatterhouse. However, we're not quite done with the party yet, because in 2010, now Namco Bandai Games decided to attempt to reboot Splatterhouse. That's right, 2010 brought us Splatterhouse, aka Splatterhouse USA, which was never released in Japan. And as many things post-2000 did, it tended to up the gore factor. Splatterhouse Reboot is combat-oriented, with Rick fighting various monsters in either hand-to-hand combat or with makeshift weapons. Rick is able to attack his enemies with super strength and rip them apart. He can also chain attack togethers into combos. Rick can lose limbs, but is able to grow them back over time. And his lost arms can be used as clubs to fight enemies. After brutalizing and mutilating his enemies, Rick can collect blood from them, which will allow the player to unlock new moves and perform special attacks. As well as he can perform splatter kills, which are extremely gory finishing moves. However, the good news is the game has the original Splatterhouse trilogy, the first one being based off the arcade as opposed to the TurboGrafx-16 port, as unlockables. So if you ever are able to track down a version of this game, which was released on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, you technically can have the classic trilogy in there as well once they are unlocked. Which is not bad at all. It basically makes the reboot games serve as a compilation collection. Although, frankly put, I would prefer having a legitimate compilation collection, especially now that it's been 11 years, and just, have the other 3 games available from the start. But I'm weird like that. I've always felt it was odd when you have a revived franchise and it's like, oh yeah, it includes the original game, but you can't play the original game until you play our new one. It's almost like they're trying to trick you and force you into playing the original or the new reboot game first and getting hooked on it, and then presenting the original game as like a little bonus mini game thing. It's like, it's just weird. It's weird. I like having the original games accessible on modern consoles. Having them bundled into a reboot game is cool because you are acknowledging it is a reboot game, but at the same time, I don't like them being unlocked by achieving things within the game, especially since sometimes those achievements are actually kind of hard to do for casual gamers. Now, the plot generally follows the classic one. Jennifer is set to have an interview with Dr. West, a professor of necrobiology. Her boyfriend Rick comes along, so nothing bad happens. Unfortunately, something bad does happen as Rick and Jennifer are attacked by Dr. West's experiments, kidnapping Jennifer and leaving Rick mortally wounded. Blah, blah, blah. There comes that possessed tongue again. Keeps trying to mix words. Blah, blah. Rick discovers the terror mask, which says it will save him and help save Jennifer if he puts it on. Rick then puts it on, transforms into his butt kicker form, and does what he does. In the end, Rick succeeds in rescuing Jennifer and thwarting Dr. West's plans. Rick and the mask manage to kill all of the monsters, including the lead monster, the Overlord, but in the process, a stray spirit possesses Jennifer. Which means that the game ends with Rick trying to pry the mask off, but the mask refusing, as it knows, but Rick doesn't, that Jennifer is possessed, and thus the threat is not over. Now, I will freely admit I have not played the modern Splatterhouse game, so I can't really tell you much about, personally, if it's an enjoyable game to play. Still, if you want a game where you're going to kill a bunch of dead stuff that doesn't rely on using a bunch of guns, hey, track down the Splatterhouse Reboot if you can. Let me check something real quick. I know most of the classic Splatterhouse games are available on the different Namco Museum collections, which are available for a variety of platforms, and are good times to pick up if you have that option. Besides the Splatterhouse games, there are a bunch of other really cool classic Namco games in the collections. We're not going to get into that because I can fill up a whole video with the Namco Museum. Still, it's the thing. Just want to check something real quick. Let's see. But in general, I will say that the Splatterhouse games are a very well done franchise. They are fun, gory, horrifying games that truly capture the spirit of the supernatural. The games are not so much scary as you would expect from more modern horror games like a Resident Evil, where stuff will jump out in front of your face, around corners and everything. And with it being a 2D game, there's not a lot of, moody exploratory atmosphere. But the games do feature some very creatively designed creatures, and watching them splatter and splat as you club them to death is a fun time. Still, as I said earlier, these are not games designed for the younger children, as this is realistic style violence. So, save them for your older kids or play them yourselves as an adult. Still, we have one more rambling left before Halloween. And it's going to be a good one, folks. We are discussing a legend of all things supernatural and spooky. Yep. But before we do that, you gotta watch this video. And as I said, feel free to click the link and watch my playthrough of the classic Splatterhouse trilogy. And then, you gotta wait a week, because we do the ramblings on Fridays. And it's Friday, so it takes a week to get to next Friday. Unless you're watching this video late, or you're marathoning it, in which case, hey, video will come a lot quicker. If you're marathoning it after the fact, maybe on Halloween itself, hey, the video will pop up in a couple minutes. Still, no matter when you watch this, or when you watch the later videos in my series, or the older videos, stay healthy, stay spooky, and remember, this is entertainment, so don't be too hateful. You can criticize something, but don't just be negative. Halloween may be about spooky things. There may be a lot of evil floating around. All this entertainment we're breaking down. Possessing tongue, possessing evil tongue. But that doesn't mean you gotta be mean. Love your entertainment. Accept the fact not everything's made for everybody. And that's why, no matter how you celebrate Halloween, keep it safe, keep it real. Come on back every Friday, or any day you feel like hitting up the Roulette Productions channel for more fun.